It only took 5 years for Martin to propose, and 3 months for Emily to say yes, and after 6 months of planning, they were married in a small ceremony in a Boston church that neither of them had been in before. It was at the insistence of Emily's mother that the wedding took place in the church, which she claimed had come to her in a vision. But with no real objection themselves, the happy couple went with the idea on the basis they picked their own honeymoon. And that's how, in the summer of 1999, Martin and Emily were walking up the sun-scorched dirt road to Snaketown, Arizona. At the top of the dirt road, hidden behind some rocks and bare shrubs, were 2 large black SUVs, with 2 men in each. One man was speaking Spanish out of the driver's side window, while the passenger in the other SUV was translating into English for his driver, a man with a mustache and a wide-brimmed hat. It was an intense discussion that neither party seemed particularly happy with, but a compromise was made, and the English-speaking SUV drove off, kicking up dirt into a small cloud as it sped down the road, swerving as it passed the honeymooning couple. It was followed a moment later by the second SUV, going slower and taking a long look at the 2 figures walking up the hill. "Isn't this place off-limits to the public?" Emily asked, as she watched the cars descend down the hill and towards the main road. "After all the trouble it took to get a permit here, I would hope so. They said no one had started the dig up here since the 1970s. "Come on, I think it's just over this hill. I can't wait to see it," said Martin, as he playfully jabbed Emily in the arm and took off running of what remained of the hill. The Redwood Motel stood between a Jiffy Lube and a Korean tofu restaurant, but was also within walking distance of the Arizona College Prep campus, where Mr. Charles Fleming was just starting a new job as the 7th grade teacher. Chuck had shed the long hair and the flannel shirts around 1994, and much to Martin's surprise, he decided to become a teacher. They had stayed in contact, and it was through Charles's friends and the old Boston professors they had managed to get the dig permit for Snaketown. It was here that Martin and Emily had booked a 2-week stay in room 12, and it was here that the black SUV came to a stop in front of room 13. Jack Reacher was traveling light as always. He had nothing with him but the clothes on his back and some money in his pocket as he walked up North Arizona Avenue, when he realized his stomach was empty. The realization had struck him when the smell of Gigi's Cafe and barbecue hit him, and he made a sharp turn in through the door to the greeting of sizzling meat. He took a table near the window, ignored the menu, and asked the polite young waitress for the special of the day and a large cup of coffee. The waitress gave him her complimentary smile and went in to fetch his order. The food was good, warm and tasty. He had the barbecue ribs and chicken with corn and coleslaw, and left a tip of over 30% after the waitress had told him about the cheap motel next door, the Redwood. And it was because of the young pretty waitress that Jack Reacher booked into room 11 under the name of Mr. John Tyler. It was warm and dry at the Snaketown excavation, and after 4 hours on hands and knees working, Martin and Emily were ready to head back to the hotel. They had had 2 weeks to work undisturbed and had only planned to find and scout the dig site on their first day trip, but had stayed a little longer than expected. Heading back down the dirt road, they were surprised to see one of the SUVs coming back up the hill. It slowed as it approached them on its passenger side, and the window silently slid down. A man looked at them both with small slits for eyes, and Martin could see the driver, wearing a cowboy hat, also giving him a look that suggested he was not a man to make enemies with. "What are you doing here?" asked the man in the passenger side, a slight accent in his voice. "We're here for the Snaketown dig. We're archaeologists," answered Martin as he looked at Emily, a quizzical look crossing his face. They both turned towards the man in the SUV, but before either of them could say anything, the driver stamped on the pedal and the SUV shot up the hill, leaving them both in a lung-bursting cloud of dust and exhaust smoke. "What was all that about?" said Emily, as soon as her throat was clear. I have no idea. We can check with the school later and see if there's anyone else who's supposed to be up here. Yeah, let's go to the motel. I need a shower. Oh, and so do you. Jack Reacher slept after his big meal. Awaking at 8:30, he stretched, had a shower, and brushed his teeth and got dressed, and was ready to leave his room and explore the new city by 9. As he opened his door, he heard a man shout and pound on the door next to his. A large man with an accent was using both hands to slam against the door. "You better come on out, gringos. What do you think you're doing here?" "Hey, can I help you?" "You cannot help me, gringo. Go back inside before I cut you open and use your insides to strangle this pendejo in here." The man slammed his hand against the door as a punctuation point and used his free hand to pull a very large knife out from under his jacket. Reacher opened the door to his room and gave the man a small nod, a submission to the man's orders, and stepped inside. After his shower, Reacher had used a small towel to dry his huge frame. He had hung the towel over the small radiator in his room. It was still wet, and he picked it up and headed for the door. The man was now kicking at the door, but stopped long when he saw Reacher exit his room for a second time. "I thought you were smart, but you are an idiota," he said, pointing the knife at Reacher's chest. Reacher had the towel in his hand, and as the man looked down at it, he flicked it as hard as he could and connected the wet end with the man's right eye. As he screamed and flung his hands up to his stinging eye, Reacher curled the towel around the wrist holding the knife and twisted the hand back. The knife clanged as it bounced on the ground, and Reacher caught it on the volley and kicked it into the parking lot where it came to rest under the SUV. There was no real injury to his eye, and the man opened it just in time to see a huge fist slam into his face, closing both of his eyes. Reacher stood over the unconscious body and draped a towel over the face, before looking through the man's jacket for any ID. Inside was a wallet with $70, a driver's license, and assorted credit cards. There was also a set of keys, and a key with a little wooden diamond hanging from it, the number 13 etched into the wood. It matched Reacher's own room key. Leaving the man lying on the ground, Reacher walked over and gave a little knock on room 13. After 30 seconds, there was no answer, so he tried again, and slowly opened the door with the key. The room was exactly the same as his own, with the exception of a large duffel bag on the bed. He searched the bathroom and the drawers, but there was nothing else there. Before opening the duffel bag, Reacher went back outside, and firemen carried the body into the room, dumping it on the bed. The man was still unconscious, but Reacher knew he would wake up soon. Even so, he wasn't too worried. Opening the duffel bag, he found some clothes and bathroom supplies, and at the bottom a small metal box, padlocked shut. He went back to the wallet and searched for any hidden pockets containing a key. Finding none, he took the driver's license out instead. Ramon Cabrera was the unconscious man on the bed. Reacher disconnected the cord from the room phone and the wall, stuffing it in his pocket, and took the duffel bag with the man's possessions and the metal box and left the room, locking it behind him. He walked to the SUV and opened the door with the keys. He had a search through the glove box and found nothing interesting. He dropped the bag on the passenger side, then popped the trunk. There was no key for the box in the trunk, but there was a pump-action shotgun and a tire iron. Reacher thought the shotgun was maybe overkill for the small padlock, so he opened it using the tire iron, and found a small gold statue of a man holding what looked like a ball. Reacher took a closer look at the shotgun and handled it for a minute or two. Reacher closed the trunk and headed back to the room, and as he did, the door to room 12 opened, and a man came out holding a toothbrush. "I think you might need something bigger than that," said Reacher, as the man stepped outside of the door and looked at the brush in his hand. "Where's that other guy?" asked Martin, taking a step back towards the room door. Don't worry about him. He won't bother you for a while. Do you mind telling me why he wanted to kill you?" We have no idea. We don't even know who he is." "Who's we?" Emily came into view in the doorway, and Martin turned to look at her and urge her to go back inside. She ignored him and came out anyway. "What's that in your hand?" she asked, eyeing the gold statue. "I have no idea, but it seems important to the guy banging on your door," said Reacher. "Can I see it?" asked Emily, moving cautiously towards the giant in the parking lot. "Sure. Maybe you can give me some explanation for what's going on." He handed over the statue and let her walk back to Martin, where they both stared at it. "Well, what do you think?" Reacher said, growing impatient, worried about when Ramon would wake up and start breaking his room apart. It's an idol. Well, not really. It's more like a trophy. A sports trophy for a game called hip ball." She saw the quizzical look on Reacher's face and continued. "The Snaketown archaeological site nearby, have you heard of it?" she asked. "I'm not really from around here, and I don't know anything about sites," Reacher said. "Well, it was inhabited roughly 1,000 years ago, and they have these ball courts where sporting events and large feasts. A lot of the Mesoamerican cultures have them, and they had a sport we call hip ball. It's still played in some Central American countries, and this looks like it could have been a trophy from that time. It was probably awarded to the winner's village. I mean, I've read about them, but I've never seen one up close." "How do you know all this?" "We're archaeologists," said Martin. "Oh, I see. So is it valuable?" "Well, sorry, but who are you?" "My name is Jack Reacher, and you are?" "I'm Emily, and this is my husband, Martin. Are you a cop?" "Something like that. Well, anyway, I was. Not so much anymore. Is this why that guy wanted to kill you?" "We don't know. We saw him twice today at the dig site, but we were just there to work. We have no idea who he is." "Well, all right. Why don't you keep a hold of that trophy, and I'll see if I can get some answers. I'll come get you soon." Reacher watched the archaeologists go into their room and walked over to room 13. He put the key in, unlocked the door, pushed it open, and took a step back. Ramon was waiting just inside the door with a small switchblade in his hand, which he thrust out into the open air before Reacher knocked it down and backhanded Ramon on the nose, sending him back into his room. "I knew I should have checked your boots," Reacher said as he stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "Now sit down, Ramon. We have a lot to talk about. Let's not waste time fighting. It's only going to end one way." After some vague and half-hearted threats in a multitude of languages and some inspired use of a coat hanger by Reacher, he discovered Ramon was working with a Texan by the name of Kellar, a real estate developer who had tried and failed to get planning rights for the grounds surrounding Snaketown. During an unofficial and illegal excavation, Kellar's people had found the golden statue and were in the process of selling it on the black market to a buyer in Mexico. Kellar had figured the sale of the statue would recoup some of his costs from the failed real estate venture. How Martin and Emily came into it was just bad luck and bad timing on their part. They had been seen at the site twice, and when they walked back to their motel, they were spotted a third time, going into the room next door to theirs. Kellar had become paranoid and instructed Cabrera to find out what was going on and take care of it. "And where is your boss now?" asked Reacher, twirling the coat hanger in his hands like a baton. "He went to another motel, I don't know what one," spat Ramon, not daring to look Reacher in the eye. "So how are you going to find him?" "He was supposed to call, but you ripped the phone out of the wall." "So I'll plug it back in." Reacher took the cord out of his pocket and plugged the phone back in. "When is he supposed to call?" "Sometime around 10. "Well, it's 22:13, so let's wait and see what happens." "How do you know that? You're not even wearing a watch." They sat in silence, Ramon on the bed, occasionally wiping blood from his nose, and Reacher standing by the door. The phone rang 10 minutes later, and Reacher picked it up. "Hello?" "You're not Ramon," said the voice on the other end. "No, I'm just a guy answering his phone." "So where is he? Is he dead?" "No, Ramon is right here, all safe and sound, and he'll stay that way, and so will you if you hang up and get out of this town." So, are you that kid I saw on the dig site? Nah, you can't be. He's got some kind of Boston accent. I don't know what yours is. Is he working for you? You were right to be paranoid, Mr. Keller. But that kid you saw isn't working for me. He was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. It's just a coincidence he's next door to my hotel room. I'm afraid so. You seem to have left your driver and your car here. Did you, take a cab to your new motel? Ramon isn't my driver. I drive myself, you understand? Now who do you drive for, Mr. Reacher, Jack Reacher, and you already know who I work for. I see. You may be working for the Taladro family. Maybe. All right. What do you want? I already have what I want. The question is, what do you want me to do with Ramon here? I can cut him loose and have him scuttle back to you, and you both disappear. Or I can mail him back to you piece by piece. You can do that for me, Mr. Reacher? Well, that's very nice of you, but I think you're mistaken. With that, Reacher slammed the phone down and caught Ramon with an uppercut, then knocked him off the bed and onto the floor. Let's go find your boss. In room 12, a middle-aged man with a cowboy hat sat perched on the edge of a bureau, exactly like the one in room 11 and room 13, pointing a shotgun at a newly married couple sitting on the bed. Next to him on the bureau lay the golden statue. Jack Reacher opened the door and stood by the doorway with the bloody Ramon in front of him. It seems we have a dilemma, Mr. Reacher. Let 'em go, Killer. They have nothing to do with this. Says you. I say you have one hostage and I have two. Seems like the ball is in my court, so to speak. And I say I can snap his neck before you can pull that trigger. So what are you willing to lose to leave here with a poor imitation of an Oscar? Now that's a good question, he said as he pulled the trigger. Ramon tried to throw himself sideways, but Reacher had a hold of his jacket collar and used his momentum to crack his head off the doorframe, knocking him unconscious for the second time that night. Ramon crumpled in the doorway, and Reacher stepped over the body as Keller frantically pulled and pumped at the shotgun. The pathetic click of a trigger, his only reward. Did you happen to check if it was loaded? Reacher asked as he pulled a handful of shells out of his pocket. Now, how did you? When I checked the SUV earlier, I emptied it, of course. Didn't you wonder why I left it behind? The jaw on Keller hung loose, and Reacher tightened it back up for him with a ferocious uppercut that sent the Texan backwards into the bathroom. Jack Reacher turned back to Martin and Emily, sitting on the bed. Martin had a busted nose, but otherwise they were both unharmed. Can I trust you to get this somewhere safe, being archaeologists and all? He picked up the gold statue from the bureau and handed it to them. Yeah, of course, thank you for everything, Martin said. Does he know who you are? Did you tell him your names or anything? No, he never asked. He just wanted the statue and then he said he was going to kill you. You have somewhere safe to go, somewhere that no one knows. Well, we have friends that live in town. Nobody knows them, said Emily. Good. Go there. Lay low for a while. Don't go back to Snaketown. I'll take care of all this and wrap it all up. Martin and Emily Fagan spent the rest of their honeymoon in Charles Fleming's spare room, where they kept the golden statue in a plastic bag wrapped under their bed.